Israel is getting ready for a full-scale ground invasion of Gaza in retaliation for the terror attack by Hamas. I'm Barkha Dutt, you're with the Mojo Story. Dramatic images have emerged in the last 24 hours after Israel set a 24-hour deadline for 1.1 million Palestinians in Gaza to relocate within Gaza. The IDF, the Israeli forces, have already unveiled and launched short raids, military raids inside the Gaza territory. The BBC is reporting that bodies have been recovered that include bodies of hostages that were taken by Hamas. Even as international agencies are calling for a humanitarian corridor and humanitarian access in Gaza so that civilians who did not have anything to do with Hamas do not have to pay the price, Israel at the moment seems undeterred. Although the 24-hour deadline has come and gone and that full-scale incursion has not yet taken place, the bombing of Gaza continues, and we have to wait and see what happens in the next 2 or 3 days. Now, at the moment, our team is also trying to get to Israel. We are broadcasting this program from Addis Ababa in Ethiopia. If you're wondering what we're doing there, most commercial flights through other routes are cancelled at the moment. So is our flight cancelled, and we're very much hoping that on the next flight we can get there, be on the ground, and give you reports as we see them and experience the reality on the ground. But in the meantime, you can see what's unfolding on the images in front of your eyes, images of war, images of conflict, and images of great human suffering. In the midst of all of this, India, the foreign ministry, has reiterated its opposition to terrorism in all forms, but also the rights of the Palestinian people to their own sovereign state. In other words, the two-state peace formula. This after the Prime Minister reiterated not once but twice India's solidarity with Israel in the immediate aftermath of the Hamas attack. To walk us through what might happen next, India's position, and the larger geopolitical implications, I want to welcome to our special broadcast a veteran diplomat, also the author of a book on West Asia. Ironically, his book was called West Asia at War, and that's exactly what we're seeing take place all over again. Ambassador Talmiz Ahmad is with us. Thank you very much, sir. Let me ask you to step back and take a look at the overall situation. Where is this headed? How does it end?
The main narrative emerging from this conflict is the shocking success of Hamas in their initial assault upon Israel. There is a total asymmetry in terms of their power equation, and yet this militant group, born out of the squalid conditions of Gaza, which has been under siege for 17 years, was able to cross the Gaza-Israel border at 22 places, inflict extraordinary casualties upon the Israelis, both in terms of their military and security personnel as also civilians, and take back 150 hostages. This is the main narrative. What is going on now was expected from day one, that Israel would then retaliate. Here the retaliation will be even more violent, even more virulent, because of the shock assault upon the invincibility that Israel has projected up to now. They have a government and a military that is today fundamentally discredited in the eyes of the international community as well as in the eyes of their own citizens. To compensate for their failures, they are going to inflict extraordinary harm upon the people of Gaza as also upon their infrastructure. We all expected that, and it is going to happen. What they are going to seek is a kill rate. Israel has a kill rate, a ratio, 1:10, 1:20, possibly 1:40. They have done this before. Many of us are not shocked. This is precisely what they have done several times. So I feel they are going to seek initially a kill rate of 1:10. They want to kill at least 10,000 Palestinians before they would be ready for a truce. More importantly, they want to kill a certain high profile individuals so that they can finally tell the Israeli people, we have avenged you. I'm not sure that is going to save the government or the military, but that is what they will try to do.
I think you're very prescient in capturing the deep unpopularity of Netanyahu. That's one of the unanimous opinions emerging even among interviews of Israeli experts and commentators that we've been conducting. But Ambassador, the Israelis argue, since you spoke about Israel's kill rate, that if you look at the Hamas attack. In terms of statistics, then this is the worst terror attack in the history of the world, they argue, when considered in terms of victims per million. They say it's much worse than 9/11 because Israel is a smaller country. And they say that they don't care about anything else right now, but retaliating for that terror attack.
You see, using terminology like terrorism is not particularly helpful. The Palestinian people are living under occupation. Under international norms, they have a right to fight for their freedom. This is a norm that has been in place for more than a century. Every country that has lived under occupation has used violent means in order to free themselves. Indeed, the Zionist movement itself had a very large number of people who used extremely violent methods against civilians throughout their campaign for the creation of their state. Even in our own country, we have individuals who are today looked at like heroes. Therefore, let's not get into terminology. Today, academia doesn't even
Doesn't
use the word
doesn't
terrorism.
language doesn't language matter? Doesn't language matter as a country that has
It matters
experienced?
a lot
Uh,
because
I'll
terrorism
just
is
I'll
a
just complete
value
my.
added concept. It carries a certain odium. We use the word nowadays violent extremism. Violent extremism is a more neutral concept and does greater justice to the situation than a value loaded concept emerging from Tel
If
Aviv.
if I may just ask a question, then I'll let you complete your answer. For example, in the aftermath of 26/11, we saw it as an act of war. We saw it as an attack by terror groups like the Lashkar-e-Taiba and the Jaish-e-Mohammed. I don't think Indians look at those groups as violent extremists, though they may argue that they too are expressing some form of quote unquote resistance. So my question, Ambassador, with respect, would be: isn't it dangerous to not recognize that Hamas has committed an act of terror?
What we have to recognize, and I think the time has come for that, it has been overdue, I would say. It is the state terror that Israel has exercised with impunity at least over the last 30 years. You see, there is in academia not just the use of violent extremism as a term in replacement of the word terrorism, there is also the acceptance of the term state terrorism. Israel is guilty of state terrorism. When you use massive firepower against an occupied people and you destroy their means of livelihood and take away from them their dignity, that is deemed to be state terror. There is no moral equivalence over here. State terror is exercised by a more powerful occupation force. What you have over here are the occupied people fighting back and fighting for their freedom, even if it means large numbers of them are killed.
Are you then saying that, in your opinion, the Hamas attack, which has included killing elderly women, which is included taking women and children hostage, is something that you see as justified?
I am not particularly impressed by this kind of loaded, discourse relating
I'm
to
just
women
trying
and
to
children.
understand. Hmm.
If you go back to Israel's record, look at the very large number of women and children they have killed with impunity, never been indicted so far. Even when an attempt was made by the United Nations to actually condemn them for their violence in 2006, they got that report rubbished. And they then put pressure on the Justice Goldstone from South Africa and told him that being a Jew, he had no right to write that report. We know their record. Even today, I mean, as I'm speaking to you, already about 1,500 or 1,900 Palestinians are killed in Gaza. 600 of them are children. 300 of them are women. What are we talking about women and children all the time? The Israelis have killed women and children for several decades with impunity.
What happens now? You said Israel has a kill rate, but there are also Israeli hostages. And in the past, as you know, Israel, one
for
second,
the
sir. In the
hostages at
past,
this stage. I want to make
sorry,
this
sir.
point clear.
Okay,
My
sorry, go ahead.
understanding of what is happening today, there has been a very careful build up with regard to this situation so that even if hostages are killed, Netanyahu and his outfit are protected. Look at what they have done. They have declared Hamas human animals. Biden has spoken of them as evil. Their own leaders have said they deserve to be exterminated. Their American politicians have said that that entire Gaza should be bombed with a nuclear weapon. It should be transformed into a city of tents. And what the Americans should encourage Israel to do in Gaza is what the Americans did in Japan at the end, towards the end of the Second World War. Use the nuclear weapon, those people scream. What we are looking at, therefore, is fight with no holds barred from the Israeli side. They want to kill as many people as possible and destroy as much infrastructure as possible. They are doing this in the name of finding out Hamas. There are no Hamas to find out. These are all resistance fighters. With regard to hostages, what Netanyahu has done, protected himself by bringing in Benny Gantz as well as the other person who is a former army chief, Eisenkot, and therefore they are today part of this assault. They take responsibility for the military assault. I am not sure that hostage safety is a priority concern as far as the Israelis are concerned.
Basically, you're saying that although in the past Israel has been known to release, hundreds of prisoners to bring one Israeli home, today you believe that Israel has written off the safety. That is your impression of bringing their hostages home.
This is a completely different situation. That soldier had been in custody for a very, very long time. He was a sole individual. At that time, Netanyahu was looking at elections and he wanted something popular. He was not at that time in the midst of conflict. They are in the midst of conflict. At that time, he scored political points by releasing people. Also, let us focus on this release of people. Almost every Palestinian in the occupied territories has suffered incarceration without any judicial process. Hundreds of them, thousands of them at any time are in Israeli prisons. Look at the abuse they have suffered, the torture they have suffered. Look at the large number of women and children who are also in the Israeli prisons. If Israel releases even 1,000 of them, several thousand are still in prison. My own assessment today is Israel is not prioritizing the release of hostages. It is prioritizing repression and punishment. This is their moment. And this is how this government, which has failed its people, it is now seeking to redeem itself with this extraordinary kill rate that they have now initiated action on.
How do you think the world might respond? In the immediate aftermath of the Hamas attack, we saw much of the world, including India, expressing immediate solidarity. Do you see that shifting? Do you see that changing? Or do you think the world will let Israel retaliate on its own terms?
I'm not sure the Israelis have ever cared, even once, for any action, for anybody speaking about them. There is no such thing as international opinion that has ever concerned any Israeli so far. They are to some extent concerned about the Americans, but the Americans in a knee-jerk reaction have already given them full support. Not only has Biden used some extreme language of his own, he has said, I have seen evidence of something which he had not seen any evidence of. There is a massive war in social media of gross misinformation that is now spreading all over the place. Overwhelmingly, the traditional opinion still holds. Countries of the global south totally support the Palestinian cause. It is the Western alliance led by the United States that supports Israel. And when I say Western alliance, I am not even sure of the opinion of various Europeans. Europeans don't even count in this scenario. What you have today is a United States that is very deeply polarized because of the election mood that has already crept in. You have a beleaguered presidency, now absolutely terrified about something that may be used against them in the election campaign. Donald Trump made just one statement criticizing Biden for providing $6 billion to the America, to the to the Iranians. And you know what the Americans did immediately? They told Qatar not to transfer that money. This is part of that prisoners, it was part of that prisoner swap. That means the Americans have reneged on a solemn agreement with the Iranians in order to appease domestic opinion at home. In this scenario, what is Israel afraid of? Nothing at all. They have got rabid American politicians. Nick Haley, who is a presidential candidate, has said they are sick animals. These Palestinians are sick animals and they should be exterminated.
Let's talk about the India response. The Prime Minister took to social media to express unequivocal solidarity with Israel after a conversation with Benjamin Netanyahu. He repeated that. A more detailed foreign ministry statement actually took the much more classic, consistent position, which is to recognize the rights of the Palestinians to an independent state, but also to call out terrorism. How do you see the India response?
The first response of the Prime Minister is the authentic response. It is a response that comes from a combination of ideological affinity of Hindutva with Zionism and the PM's personal emotional bond with Prime Minister Netanyahu. So he's expressed solidarity very quickly, and he also referred to Hamas as a terrorist organization. Later on, because of counsels from various sources, they started having a balancing act, repeating it, saying that the Indian people support you. There is no evidence of that. But the Indian people, because the Prime Minister has the prerogative of speaking on behalf of the Indians, so he has said the Indian people support you, but got cautious when he was speaking about terrorism, saying he condemns all forms of terrorism, which means he is also condemning Israeli state terrorism. The Foreign Office is then sort of tried to get a 50% solution, supporting the PM by declaring Hamas a terrorist organization, but otherwise talking of the rights of the Palestinian people. May I say something which is very painful both to me and to your listeners? Nobody cares what India is saying. India is irrelevant in terms of its posture. Everyone knows that India's heart belongs with Netanyahu, and that the approach is more to do with our ideological posture at home and the agenda that we have at home. India has abdicated all strategic space in West Asia to other players. We are today focusing only on promoting economic cooperation with various countries in West Asia. There is no serious strategic content with regard to our approach. Our relations with different countries remain, as I have said earlier, bilateral and transactional, and that is what we see. Please don't exaggerate the importance of any of these remarks. Nobody is sitting and analyzing them. Everyone has moved on. There is so much else happening. India's views, India's priority, as I have mentioned before, is the domestic agenda, and that is what exercises the mind and the time of our leadership. What all happens in the rest of the world is of minimal interest as far as our leaders are concerned, and of minimal consequence as far as the region is concerned.
You said that the Prime Minister identified Hamas as a terror group, and so did the Foreign Ministry statement. But how would India categorize Hamas? How has India classically categorized Hamas? And
Nobody
even
has
if
asked you to characterize Hamas. Hamas is an entity, it's a representative of the Palestinian people. It is living under occupation. It is a militant force as well as a political force. It has a long history behind it. Why do we, foreign people sitting far away with very little knowledge and interest in what is happening there, start categorizing people who are today fighting for their own freedom? Our own people in the past have fought for our freedom and given their life. No Indian has ever called them terrorists.
Ambassador, how would we feel if this is how people spoke about the Lashkar and the Jaish and called them political groups? They also claim they're advocating for Kashmir. How would
You
we
see,
feel
there
as
is a
Indians?
difference being under occupation and being part of the integral and being part of Jammu and Kashmir. Jammu and Kashmir is an integral part of India. Anyone takes up arms against India, he will be branded as a violent extremist and in the eyes of our government as a terrorist. If there is a foreign sponsored terrorist attack upon India, we will attack it very harshly. Lashkar-e-Taiyiba, Jaish-e-Mohammed, etc., they are Pakistan sponsored entities and they are terrorist organizations. But in the case of the occupied territories, they are not an integral part of Israel. They do not enjoy any rights under the Israeli constitution, whatever passes for that constitution, because that country doesn't have one. They live in squalid lives. They lead truly squalid lives. This kind of system that privileges the the Jewish community over everyone else has been condemned as apartheid by the human rights organizations. So there is no comparison between our
But
experience in Jammu and Kashmir and what is happening in Palestine.
Okay. Even if you see those that my analogy is misplaced, let me say to you that the accounts that have come out of Israel are horrific. There is a peace activist who has been killed. There is a grandmother lying in a pool of blood. You have seen women. I know you think I'm overstating this, but we've seen the videos of women taken as hostages. There's a music concert at which 300 young people have been killed just because they were at a music concert. These were not combatants. These were not representatives of Netanyahu's policies. What did they do wrong that they deserve to be killed? And is this not an act of terror?
See, now you are raising issues that are not material to the present conflict. Who did right, who did wrong?
No, I'm raising them
Overwhelmingly,
because
when you
you're
have,
saying
what do
Hamas
you think? When these
is not a
3,000
terror group.
Palestinians have been killed, all of them have done wrong, and yet they are being
No,
butchered in
no,
front of your eyes.
absolutely,
So
absolutely.
I see, look,
No,
it's not
no
a business
civilian
of
should be
taking
killed.
a moral position here. I am trying to point out to you that the Israeli conduct over the last 30 years has not been adequately scrutinized, and they have got away with extraordinary murder, indeed genocide, with total impunity. Now when someone has raised the arms against the Israeli occupation, the whole world gathers together and says, oops, sorry, these are terrorists taking action against women. Also, there is a lot of misinformation going on. Netanyahu is part of that misinformation campaign. Indeed, as far as Israel is concerned, misinformation goes alongside all their campaigns, and the Westerners lap it up. I would exercise a certain degree of caution with regard to stories coming out from Israel with regard to their atrocities. While their own atrocities are actually caught on camera by their own media and by international media, we don't have to do anything. Misinformation on social media, which is what caught the attention of Biden and talked about the strangling of babies and beheading of babies. They couldn't make up their mind whether it was strangling or beheading, but all of that has been declared
But,
as fake
but babies have been
misinformation.
killed. But if whether they were beheaded, shot, or strangled, if a child is killed, whether in Gaza or in southern Israel, we should be alarmed.
Look, I at this stage would tend to be cautious with regard to these stories. I would tend to be cautious. I'll tell you why. When the Americans were preparing for the assault upon Kuwait to liberate Kuwait from Iraqi occupation, at that stage, the major media activity was to focus on Iraqi troops killing babies in hospitals. Later on, we came to know it was entirely fake. It was meant to give an emotional buttress as far as the assault was concerned. So there is a very uncanny similarity between the misinformation of 1991 and the misinformation of 2023. I would be quite cautious about it. Look instead at what is happening in Gaza right in front of your eyes. Pictures that you yourself have put out. All of these 600 children are dead within a day of the military campaign and 6 days of bombardment. Yesterday when I looked, 7,000 bombings had taken place in Gaza already. 7,000 bombings in a space of 360 kilometers, a square kilometer. What is the kind of devastation? Even when we had bombing of Dresden, we did not have this kind of bombardment that is taking place right now. Please don't give a moral equivalence to what an occupation force does, what an occupied people do, and what an occupation force does. There is no moral equivalence in that regard.
Do you not think, in some ways, the MEA statement captures the commonsensical truth which lies in the middle of all extremes, which is that all acts of terror are to be condemned, that the Palestinian people have a right to their state, that civilians killed, whether innocent civilians who are Israeli or innocent civilians in Gaza, that is what our focus should be on. But if we get locked into not even recognizing acts of terror, then
I
this is
don't
a zero sum game.
recognize acts of terror by an occupied people. Let's be very clear, that's international law. The British called our activists who indulged in violence terrorists. We treat them as heroes and their pictures are on our walls even 80, 90 years after their acts. Please do remember that there is a difference in perspective depending on who is looking. As you know, long ago there was this term which has become so boring now, that one man's terrorist is another man's freedom fighter. That issue remains. That issue remains, never been resolved. As far as Israelis are concerned, anyone who takes up arms against them is a terrorist. But I don't think that we who are sitting outside and are not connected with this immediate conflict, we should be able to be much more objective.
Okay, let's agree to disagree here and move on. You, with all your experience, I want to understand the role of Iran. What happens? The Hezbollah has engaged, but not fully, Israeli forces on the north. Do you see Iran being drawn into this conflict?
My own sense is that every effort will be made by regional powers to ensure that this does not spread and become a regional conflict. I don't believe they want to do that. They recognize that the Israelis need to get their bloodlust satiated by killing as many Palestinians as possible. No useful purpose would be served if Hezbollah were to enter the situation at this stage. Hezbollah, by and large, when it comes to their encounter with the Israelis, have focused on protecting themselves within Lebanon. They have not taken the Israelis on elsewhere, and I think they are not going to escalate. As far as Iran is concerned, Iran has no interest whatsoever in joining any regional conflict. Strategically, I think they believe that they are in a reasonably good position. They are engaged with the Saudis and with the other Gulf countries. They have very close ties with Russia and China. They are able to sell a lot of oil in the international market. They are, I think, from their point of view, doing reasonably well. So I think that my own sense is that I don't believe that this conflict will escalate beyond the occupied territories.
Can I ask you what happens to the attempt to normalize relations between Israel and Saudi Arabia, seen by some commentators to be one trigger for the timing of this attack by Hamas?
I don't think the timing of this attack had anything to do with that normalization. That is, I think, being planned for a certain period of time, and it just happens to have occurred on a particular day. As we gain more information, we may be able to get we might be able to get some finer details with regard to the planning and the operation. My own sense is this normalization between Saudi Arabia and Israel was being robustly promoted by the Americans. The Americans feel that they have today lost West Asia. As you know, that they lost their credibility through the Trump era and did not regain it through the blundering period of the Biden presidency. Biden actually continued many of the policies of Donald Trump. Now, in that regard, when the Chinese announced the Beijing Accord between Saudi Arabia and Iran, I think that the Americans were very seriously alarmed, and I have noticed a flurry of activity. This flurry of activity also has much to do with the elections that are coming up. This presidency, which has hardly any achievement to its credit, desperately wants to show that they were able to engineer a diplomatic rapprochement between Saudi Arabia and Israel, pander to the Israel lobby and to the various supporters of Israel in their country. That is their game plan. I think that game plan is dead. We actually had not, we were never sure whether the Saudi conditions, the three conditions that Saudi Arabia had put forward, whether they had any resonance, whether they had been accepted by the Americans or not. Far too many people were already opposing it. Be that as it may, I don't believe that there is any normalization on the table for the foreseeable future.
Finally, as the Israeli forces begin preparations for a full-blown ground invasion or incursion, do you believe there is any chance of any mediatory role for any country? There was some talk that Qatar and Egypt might be talking about, mediating on the release of hostages. Do you see any space for mediation?
If you go back a little bit and recall all the conflicts which the Israelis had initiated, not once did they ever halt their military operations because of external influence. Not once. Indeed, it was the Americans that gave them extra time when they were bombing Lebanon. They gave them extra time to achieve their strategic ends before the Americans stepped in and they tried to pretend that a truce had been put in place. The Israelis will halt military operations when politically they evaluate that they have done the damage they need to in order to protect the prime ministership of Netanyahu and the reputation of their armed forces, not before that. And I believe that they would be seeking a kill rate of 1:10. Therefore, at least they will need to kill 10,000 Palestinians. They would also like to get the heads of 4 or 5 top leaders. This is exactly what George Bush Jr. did in Afghanistan after 9/11. Within a few hours, he had already made up his mind that, and what did they do? Massive bombardment of Afghanistan, killing of 500,000 people straight away. That's what the Americans did. Where the Americans failed at that time was that they could not kill Mullah Omar, Osama bin Laden and Ayman Zawahiri. Hence, they had to initiate the conflict in Kuwait, in Iraq. They might have done it anyway. This time, I think the Israelis are very clear. They need to get the head of at least some of the top Hamas leaders. Today, they have already announced that they have killed the person responsible for the air operations, and they have named him Murad Abu Murad. And in this way, they are going to look for certain high-profile targets. So, a combination of at least 5 to 10,000 Palestinians killed, more likely 10,000, and at least 5 top Hamas leaders being killed, only then will the Israelis indicate to the United Nations or anyone else who is listening that they are ready for a truce. But those truce will be under certain conditions. They have also said they want to eradicate Hamas once and for all. If you remember, they had said the same thing about Hezbollah when they attacked Lebanon, South Lebanon, and killed thousands of people. At that time too, they had said that we want to eliminate Hezbollah. Hezbollah never got eliminated. They are still there. And therefore, you can never eliminate a movement that is fighting for freedom.
Well, very provocative comments. Some would say, some I can see from our comments, some agreeing with you, many ferociously disagreeing. And as I said in this interview, we agree to disagree, but you paint a grim picture. There is going to be enormous human suffering. And that is what I am thinking about. There has been human suffering in Israel, and there is going to be a lot of catastrophic human suffering in Gaza.
May I make one small remark, if you don't mind?
Please.
The solution staring at you. If they want peace in the region, the Israelis have to work with the Palestinians and implement what they agreed to 25, 30 years ago in the Oslo Accord, a two-state solution. The two-state, any settlement between Israel and the Palestinians which gives the Palestinians back their dignity and gives them back their sovereignty and freedom is right there in front of you.
But
it is the Messianic element within Israel that will not allow it. And that is the solution. If that is the Abraham Accord that I have repeatedly said I want to see, a real accord between the two children of Abraham, the Palestinian and the Jew, they should be ones who can get into accord right here.
Do you see the Hamas and the Palestinian people as interchangeable?
Absolutely. I believe that.
Really?
I believe that. Hamas has said already in 2017 that they will be happy to live with these people, with the Israelis. That is, nobody, there are no implacable enemies. Vietnam and the United States fought with each other, and today they are engaged with each other robustly. You saw that France and Germany are allies in Europe. Nobody is an implacable enemy. What you have to do is to address the basic concerns, and once those concerns are addressed, you can have settlement. Look at the Abraham Accord. Donald Trump called the settlement between the U.A.E. and Israel, and they called it an Abraham Accord. That is not an Abraham Accord. That is an opportunistic arrangement within a certain political context. A real Abraham Accord is an accord between the Jewish and Palestinian people agreeing to share this land, which is important for both of them.
Okay, Ambassador Talmiz Ahmad, we'll leave it there. I have a feeling your comments are going to stir a major debate, and we are going to look at those responses that are already coming in. Thank you very much for talking to us.
Thank you, and all the best to you.
Thank you.
It's great to see you here. Thank you for watching our work. If you haven't subscribed yet, don't forget to click the bell icon and subscribe to Mojo Story and support independent, robust journalism.